You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon, and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. Now presenting Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was a covert American initiative that enlisted over 1,600 of Germany's scientific minds, including many who had previously held positions in the Nazi Party, to work for the U.S. government after World War II ended in Europe. Running from 1945 to 1959, this program was managed by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, and mainly executed by the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, agents. Its purpose was to leverage the expertise of these German experts in various fields, predominantly within science and technology. Part 1. Background in Operation Overcast. In February 1945, the Allied forces established a specialized task group known as T-Force within the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. This group, which expanded to more than 2,000 members by June, was responsible for investigating thousands of sites in Germany for valuable resources and technologies across various fields such as synthetic materials, advanced weaponry, and scientific research. They were especially interested in areas like synthetic rubber, oil catalysis, armored vehicle technology, rocketry, jet propulsion, naval technology, communication systems, cryptology, aeromedical research, and gliders, as well as identifying influential scientists and engineers. As the Allies advanced in late April 1945, they began encountering numerous German scientists. To manage and question these individuals, a section called the Enemy Personnel Exploitation Section was created within the T-Force, and they established an interrogation center named Camp Dustbin, initially near Paris and later relocated to Kransberg Castle outside Frankfurt. To leverage the expertise of these scientists for U.S. military research and potentially to shorten the war against Japan, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff initiated a covert recruitment drive named Operation Overcast on July 20th, 1945. This operation, jokingly referred to as Overcast by the relatives of the scientists due to the accommodation camp in Bavaria, was later directly managed by the Joint Intelligence Operations Agency, JIOA, formed as a part of the Joint Intelligence Community with representatives from military intelligence and the State Department. Initially, the goal was not to counter the Soviet Union, but to prevent the valuable scientists from migrating to neutral or other rival nations. The U.S. focused particularly on Saxony and Thuringia, regions that were handed over to Soviet control on July 1, 1945, and where many German researchers had relocated before the war ended. In contrast, the Soviet Union also captured a significant number of German experts through Operation post-WWII in October 1946. Operation Overcast was later renamed Operation Paperclip, a moniker inspired by the practice of affixing a paperclip to the application files of the German rocket specialists selected for employment in the U.S. Although the operation was initially secretive, President Truman officially sanctioned it in September 1946, widening its scope to engulf around 1,000 German scientists. Despite efforts to keep it covert, the media exposed the program by December 1946. Lastly, on April 26, 1946, a directive from the Joint Chiefs of Staff called JCS 6714 was issued to General Eisenhower. This directive ordered the preservation and seizure of all significant scientific and military documents and data from German sources. It also mandated the detention of German scientists, barring known war criminals, for intelligence gathering as deemed necessary. Osenberg List. In the latter stages of World War II, Germany was struggling logistically after their unsuccessful efforts to seize control of the Soviet Union with Operation Barbarossa in 1941, and their unsuccessful campaign to capture the Caucasus region between 1942 and 1943. These failed military actions significantly drained German resources, leaving the nation's war production capabilities ill-equipped to counter the Soviet forces moving toward the West. By the beginning of 1943, the German leadership started to draw back scientists, engineers, and technicians from the battlefield to enhance their research and development efforts in preparation for a long-drawn battle with the Soviets. This reassignment pulled back around 4,000 individuals involved in rocket development to Peenemünde, on the northeastern coast of Germany. In what seemed like an overnight shift, highly qualified professionals across various scientific fields were removed from mundane or menial military duties and redeployed to tasks befitting their expertise. This required the Nazi regime to first pinpoint and vet these intellectuals for their political loyalty before they could be reassigned. Werner Osenberg, in charge of the Defense Research Association, was responsible for documenting the names of those cleared for scientific duties on what became known as the Osenberg List. As the war neared its end in March 1945, a Polish lab technician stumbled upon parts of this valuable list concealed in a restroom at Bonn University. The discovery of the list was a breakthrough, ultimately allowing it to come into the hands of British intelligence, MI6, and then forwarded to American forces. Using this list, U.S. Army Major Robert B. Staver, who led the Jet Propulsion Section of the Research and Intelligence Branch of the Army Ordnance Corps, identified and prioritized German scientists for capture. Among them was Wernher von Braun, a top German rocket scientist, who topped Major Staver's list of targets. Part 3: Identification. Initially, Major Staver planned only to conduct interviews with the German scientists. However, he quickly realized the significance of their knowledge, prompting a shift in the operation's focus. On the 22nd of May, 1945, he relayed a message from Colonel Joel Holmes to the U.S. Department of War. Holmes recommended relocating 100 out of 400 German scientists in his charge to the United States, highlighting their crucial role in the ongoing war efforts in the Pacific. Many of these scientists were from the Osenberg List and had been working at Peenemünde on Germany's Baltic coast. There, they were integral to the development of the V-2 rocket. Once the Allied forces took them prisoner, they and their families were first placed in Landshut, a town in the southern part of Germany, in Bavaria. Starting on the 19th of July, 1945, the captured German rocket specialists were managed by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff under Operation Overcast. However, as soon as the local population learned of the name Camp Overcast, the designation for the accommodation of the scientists, the operation was rebranded to Operation Paperclip in November of that year. Despite efforts to maintain secrecy around the operation, some of the scientists were interviewed by members of the media later in the same year. Part 4: Capture and Detention. Initially, the United States established the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, CIOS, with the mission to identify key scientific, military, and industrial installations and personnel within Germany for their expertise. The immediate focus was on securing advanced technologies like infrared that could be useful in the ongoing conflict against Japan, determining the extent of technological transfer to Japan, and curtailing research in other nations. In 1945, renowned rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, along with over 1,000 of his fellow experts, chose to surrender to the United States. They moved towards American-controlled territory on June 20, 1945, due to their distrust of the French, fear of the Soviets, and belief that the British could not support them, all while the Soviet army was advancing. The operation to prevent German scientists from potentially continuing their research in neutral nations was named Project Safe Haven. Rather than intending to directly target the Soviet Union, it aimed to prevent technology from reaching any unfriendly country. With U.S. attention on the German regions of Saxony and Thuringia, which were soon to fall under Soviet control, an evacuation operation was launched to remove scientific talent before the Soviets could access them. Orders were issued for these individuals to leave without winter clothes, but to take valuable personal items, and they were transported firstly by vehicle, then by train towards the west. By 1947, around 1,100 technicians and scientists and their 3,700 family members had been repositioned by the United States. Some were kept in interrogation centers like Dustbin for extensive questioning. While a portion of these scientists were included in Operation Overcast, most were placed in remote villages without access to research facilities, given financial support, and were monitored regularly by police. The Joint Chiefs of Staff insisted that these scientists and technicians only be released after intelligence agencies had extracted all useful knowledge. On November 5, 1947, the Office of Military Government in the U.S. sector of Germany deliberated over the future of these evacuees, addressing their financial claims against the U.S. and concerns over potential breaches of war laws. An unsuccessful jungle program aimed at relocating the German experts to developing countries was proposed by the American intelligence official Robert L. Walsh. In 1948, financial settlements amounting to 69.5 million Reichsmarks were allotted to the evacuees by the U.S., but these funds quickly lost their value due to currency reforms that introduced the Deutsche Mark. Historian John Gimbel suggests that by sequestering Germany's top intellectual capital for 3 years, the post-war recovery of Germany was deprived of significant expertise. Part 5. Arrivals. In May of 1945, the inventor of the HS-293 missile, Herbert A. Wagner, was taken under the control of the U.S. Navy. For 2 years, he contributed to projects at the Special Devices Center, located in Castle Gould and Hempstead House on Long Island, New York, before relocating to Point Mugu's Naval Air Station in 1947. Following the end of World War II, Colonel Holger Toftoy, who was in charge of the Army Ordnance Corps' rocket branch, extended 1-year job offers to German rocket experts. 127 accepted the offer. By September 1945, a group of 7 engineers, including notable figures like Wernher von Braun, arrived at Fort Strong in Boston Harbor. Towards the end of 1945, groups of rocket scientists began arriving in America to take up positions at Fort Bliss, Texas, and White Sands Proving Grounds, New Mexico, employed as special staff under the War Department. The following year, the U.S. Bureau of Mines hired 7 German specialists experienced with synthetic fuel production to work in a chemical plant in Louisiana, Missouri. In mid-1949, the Chief of Ordnance declared Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, the Center for Army Rocket Research and Development. Shortly thereafter, in the spring of 1950, the team from Fort Bliss, including more than 130 experts from Operation Paperclip, was transferred to the Redstone Arsenal. During the early 1950s, some of the German specialists from Project Paperclip were granted U.S. residency after going through the consulate in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. From 1945 to 1952, the Air Force was the largest employer of these specialists, bringing in 260 men. Some returned to Germany, while others, like Walter Schreiber, left for countries like Argentina. The United States Army Signal Corps also employed 24 experts in various scientific fields. This group included physicists, chemists, a geophysicist, an optician, and several engineers. In 1959 alone, 94 additional German experts were brought to the U.S. Over the duration of its execution, which lasted until 1990, Operation Paperclip facilitated the immigration of 1,600 German scientists, technicians, and engineers to the United States and the United Kingdom. This was a part of the reparations from World War II, providing an immense value estimated at $10 billion through patents and industrial techniques. Part 6. Major awards in the United States. The most prestigious recognition that NASA can grant is the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. In 1969, after spending over 20 years in leadership roles within NASA, 4 individuals who were part of Operation Paperclip, a secret program that recruited German scientists after World War II, received this honor. These individuals were Kurt Diebes, Eberhard Rees, Arthur Rudolph, and Wernher von Braun. Additionally, in 1973, Ernst Geisler was awarded the same medal. The highest honor for civilians from the U.S. Department of Defense is the Department of Defense Distinguished Civilian Service Award. A former Nazi and Operation Paperclip participant, Siegfried Knemeyer, was a recipient of this award in 1966 after 20 years of work. When it comes to the field of astronautics, the Goddard Astronautics Award is the AIAA's most esteemed award, and 3 Operation Paperclip members were recipients: Wernher von Braun in 1961, Hans von Ohain in 1966, and Kraft Arnold Erika in 1984. The U.S. Space Camp Hall of Fame, which is operated by the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, has inducted several people from Operation Paperclip. Werner von Braun and Georg von Tiesenhausen in 2007, followed by Oscar Holderer in 2008. At the New Mexico Museum of Space History, the International Space Hall of Fame has recognized two Operation Paperclip members, Werner von Braun in 1976 and Ernst Steinhoff in 1979. Hubertus Strugold was inducted in 1978 but was later removed in 2006. This group also acknowledges the contributions of two German spaceflight pioneers who were not part of Operation Paperclip, Willy Lai in 1976 and Hermann Oberth in 1976, the latter of whom advised von Braun's team in America between 1955 and 1958. Lastly, two lunar craters bear the names of Operation Paperclip scientists, one named Debus after the first director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Kurt Debus, and the other named von Braun. Part 7. Advancements in Aeronautics. Significant migration. Many people relocated from one region to another. Adolf Bussmann, a native of Lübeck, Germany, born in 1902, completed his higher education in engineering at the Technical University of Braunschweig and earned a doctoral degree in 1924. He entered the field of aeronautics as a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute in 1925 and later pursued an academic career as a professor at the University of Göttingen in 1930. His professional life involved significant work for Germany's government, particularly heading the research facility in Braunschweig. At the 1935 Volta Congress, dedicated to high-speed flight challenges, he unveiled a groundbreaking concept indicating that angling aircraft wings could minimize air resistance at supersonic velocities. Post-World War II, he relocated to the United States, contributing to their Cold War efforts against the Soviet Union while further advancing his aerodynamic theories. Werner von Braun. Rocket and space exploration technologies owe much to Werner von Braun, the architect of the V-2 missile. Starting in 1932, he joined the German Army's endeavors to develop missiles using liquid propulsion and completed his PhD in physics in 1934 at the University of Berlin. His surrender to Allied forces happened shortly after World War II and Hitler's demise in 1945. The U.S., under Operation Paperclip, integrated him and his team into their space program. Von Braun initially focused on rocketry in Texas before moving to Alabama, where he eventually led the Marshall Space Flight Center beginning in 1960. Despite his achievements in space exploration, his past association with the Nazi Party and exploitation of forced labor during the V-2 rocket's development cast a shadow over his legacy. He formally joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and held an SS rank by 1940. Marshall Space Flight Center. The Marshall Space Flight Center came into existence in Huntsville, Alabama, in July 1960, when NASA took over the Army's missile operations at Redstone Arsenal. Werner von Braun was appointed as the facility's inaugural director. The genesis of its engineering team was a blend of local American talent from Redstone and 118 German experts who had previously worked in Peenemünde and arrived through Operation Paperclip. Commencing their American journey at Fort Bliss in Texas in 1945, the group became central to Huntsville's rocketry efforts by 1950. Initially, the focus was on armaments and refinement of the V-2 rocket lineage, but the center's role evolved to become a key contributor to NASA's lunar explorations, including developing the Lunar Roving Vehicle. The center's pivotal projects revolved around the continued work on the V-2 and Apollo missions. V-2 rocket. Germany's V-2 rocket, developed under Werner von Braun's guidance at the Peenemünde Research Facility, saw use as a weapon against Paris and Britain during World War II, resulting in the loss of approximately 5,000 lives. Following an Allied air attack on Peenemünde, rocket production shifted to middle work with forced labor from the adjacent Dora concentration camp. The technology was transferred to the U.S. following the Axis defeat, where in 1946 New Mexico became the site for V-2 testing. One such test achieved an unprecedented altitude of 116 miles, conducting biological experiments in space and capturing Earth's first high-altitude photos. The V-2 also played a role in studying the impacts of high gravitational forces on animals. Apollo missions. NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center was one of the pivotal entities in the Apollo lunar program, leveraging its extensive research and testing capabilities in areas such as aeroastrodynamics and propulsion to adapt from developing military weapons to focusing on space travel. Experiences in WWII rocketry heavily influenced the design of the Saturn launch vehicles used in the program. With a commitment to quality espoused by Dieter Grau and others at the center, their engineering approach prioritized fewer, more reliable prototypes that demanded less testing overall. American and German engineers at Marshall were instrumental in developing the launch systems and facilities used for the Apollo missions at Cape Canaveral with the Saturn rockets, benefiting from the legacy of von Braun's liquid propulsion innovation, ultimately propelling astronauts to the moon. Part 8. Controversy and Investigations. President Truman hesitated for over a year before giving the green light to Operation Paperclip. However, in hindsight, during a reflection in 1963, he remarked that he was not at all hesitant to endorse the operation, justifying it as a necessary move due to the tense climate with the Soviet Union at the time. Many scientists brought over to the U.S. through Operation Paperclip were scrutinized for their past associations with the Nazi Party. Only Georg Ricke faced formal charges, and even then, he was acquitted at the Dora trial in Germany after his repatriation in 1947. No other scientists from the Paperclip group were convicted of any wrongdoing either in the United States or in Germany. Walter Schreiber faced allegations from the Boston Globe shortly after his arrival in the U.S. in 1951 concerning his ties to unethical medical experiments during the war. This led to his subsequent move to Argentina with assistance from the U.S. military. Arthur Rudolph left the U.S. for West Germany in 1984 amid concerns he might face legal consequences due to his involvement with the Nazi use of forced labor for V-2 missile production. After returning to Germany, he obtained citizenship there. Werner von Braun was probed by the FBI in 1961 about his Nazi Party membership and SS involvement. The FBI concluded that his membership was motivated by career ambitions and self-preservation. The Space Medicine Association formerly presented the Strugold Award, named after Hubertus Strugold, a key figure in space medicine innovation. This accolade was regarded as highly prestigious for half a century until it was permanently discontinued in 2013. This decision followed a Wall Street Journal report that brought attention to Strughold's alleged involvement in wartime human experimentation.